Okay, good afternoon. I would like to welcome everyone to Yekta Bakırlıoğlu's seminar. His seminar topic is Exploring New Forms of Collaboration, Open Design and Distributed Production for the Circular Economy. I will shortly introduce Yekta. Yekta Bakırlıoğlu is a postdoctoral researcher in the Department of Media and Visual Arts, Koç University, as part of the Popmakina H2020 R&I project. He received his PhD from the Department of Industrial Design, Middle East Technical University. His research interests include open design, design for sustainability, sustainable production and consumption, and design education for sustainability. Thank you, Yekta, for this seminar, and we are excited to hear you. The screen is yours.
Thank you. Screen is nice. Hi, everyone. I wanted to give a little seminar, a presentation about my research experience and how my main research interest actually comes together with open design and circular economy and how they actually combine well together. I'm just gonna illustrate the different research projects I've been in and how they actually come together in this path. Although my bio suggested that I'm only interested in open design and design for sustainability and the circular economy, I also have different side projects happening on design for long-term user experience and technology adoption and narrative and storytelling for ideation. But as I said, I'm going to focus on the first two today. And if you want to talk about the other two, we can talk about these during the Q&A. So moving on, I want to first introduce what the circular economy is. It is actually a term popularized starting from 2012 by the Dame Ellen MacArthur around a foundation of hers. And it's an economic model and a business-to-business approach originally that is inspired by previous approaches to life cycle assessment such as cradle to cradle, life's principles, blue economy, the natural step, and so on. And it's all about recapturing the embedded value throughout the production and use processes, and ideally creating zero waste at the end of it. But as you can see from this, well, you cannot see it, but the whole idea is that after the production and during use, here is our user and consumer, and the whole strategy, the whole butterfly diagram is actually dependent very much on the user and consumer who gets the repair service done, who sells for reuse, who actually sends back for refurbishment or for recycling. And the same goes for the biological side too. So it sounds like a good, great economical model, and you may think like, well, let's do it. Well, there are also many challenges from the systemic policy level of the way things work to the smallest product level. So this is a good example of how a product design can actually initiate a circular economy. This is the Fairphone, which is a phone designed to open, as it says on the side. And it has all of its components. You can break apart all of its components, and it actually enables self-repair, and you can send everything back for recycling. You can always get a different part, replace a part for repairing the product, and you can refurbish everything in the same manner. And when you look at it from a larger sustainable development goals, you are probably aware of these. These are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that were developed in 2012 by a working group in UN's Rio 20+ conference. And it currently leads the United Nations whole operation. And well, anyhow, circular economy can be placed in under number 12, which is responsible consumption and production, but it also inevitably affects and is affected by the other sustainable development goals. But there are several challenges to circular economy, and especially from a design perspective. For example, the whole idea is that people actually use and keep using the products. So it actually suggests a certain kind of physical durability, as well as emotional durability so that people would actually be motivated to do so. It also needs, it also suggests a certain behavior change and changing consumption habits, because the whole system is dependent very much on the user, and the user is the one who actually initiates all the other strategies, but that is key. And also, localization of production and consumption is also suggested here, because in the way things are produced and consumed, there are huge transportation cycles around the world in each life cycle phase. So this also needs to get more localized, or at least kind of distributed in that sense. Also to enable the post-use services such as repair and remanufacturing and so on. But in the most basic aspect, we need to actually get away from the black box thinking for product development. So overall, it kind of suggests a different model for design and production of things, but it is a little bit more complex than what is suggested from that butterfly diagram. So I'm going to go back to the Sustained Design Research Lab, initiated by our child Adoğan here. I was part of a TÜBİTAK project there, focusing on electrical household appliances, which looked at how maintenance and repair can be done, and what can facilitate effective use of resources. From the maintenance and repair side, we identified problems such as black box items require special equipment, and there are so many unique parts in them that repair is actually very hard, and there are many design details actually preventing proper maintenance in those products. And on the effective use of resources side, there is the use of electricity and water during use and maintenance, and there's also the user's perceptions on these practices that affect the use of resources. So what we did was we adopted a user-centered approach with generated methods. And very simply, the project looked like this, where we had interviews with the experts, and then we developed the generative focus groups where we derived use cases from. And then we adapted Senem Turhan's experience reflection modeling for these products, and from which we gained users' experience and knowledge, and where we derived problem areas and design considerations for designing electrical household appliances for sustainability for these concerns. It looked like this. We kind of created calls for generative focus groups where we look for experienced electrical household appliance users. And then we created a set of projective generative tools, which were individual use timelines, which were then converted into experience cards and then resource icons. And we brought different individual user experiences into a more inclusive timeline for focus group sessions, where people actually placed their experiences and discussed the whole process in terms of maintenance, repair, and resource use. And then we used product diagrams so that they could identify problematic parts in terms of maintenance and resource use. So this is an example of a GFG outcome for team makers, where we identified use stages, common practices, and areas of intervention. And after that, we kind of created the ERM toolkit for each practices, which looked like this for different products. If I can move, yep, different sets for each product. And we created interview sessions based on a selected practice in which the participants built mock-ups, such as this one. And this is how we actually gained knowledge about needs, preferences, and desires of the users, as well as some tacit knowledge that they would normally have problems in expressing, which they express through the mock-ups. So here are some outcomes examples. But of course, the point here is not the quality of the design solution that they created, but more like how they actually expressed what they need and what they want and what they desire to the act of making mock-ups. And then which we actually analyzed using a video note-taking app. And as an outcome, for each product type, we kind of found in total 33 considerations that under 3 main categories and 9 subcategories, and we could actually link them to certain parts in certain kinds of products. And edited by our Adoğan, we actually published the outcomes of this research in a book called Elektrikli Ev Aletler için Sürdürülebilir Tasarım Ölçütleri. In parallel to this, though, my PhD research was about open design for product part longevity. And I was obviously focusing again on kitchen practices because I thought I believed open design could actually suggest a truly alternative production and consumption mode of production and consumption. So to introduce what open design is, I'm going to start with this from an historical perspective. On the left is Adrien Bouvier, who is showing the first parent RapRap machine, which was produced using a conventional rapid prototyper, and which then produced the rapid prototype on the right, the child one, which was shown by the Vic Olivier. So this kind of created a lot of opportunities about what can happen and how precise these desktop digital fabrication technologies has become, and how cheap they can be in the end. So these practices and the open source sharing of design and hardware details were beginning to formalize around tech shops, hacker spaces, and maker spaces where people come together and exchange knowledge and expertise, develop different solutions, and openly share them, which was then formalized around the Fab Lab initiative started by the MIT Center of Bits and Atoms. Which then inspired the open source hardware movement, where actually this was inspired by the open source software movement, and where people began to share design and hardware data of things so that other people around the world can adopt them, further develop them, and produce them locally using these fabrication technologies. The innovation studies literature, it kind of inspired a lot of different approaches, like the open innovation, like the lead user innovation approach, and commons-based peer production, which is now currently more commonly discussed under Industry 4.0 altogether. From a design perspective, this actually came to be with the rise of user-generated content, or otherwise called Web 2.0, which we experience in the form of wikis or blogs and stuff like that. And when the designers and users began to develop alternatives to commercial products and user products. This was at the beginning of 2010s. This was called Do-It-Yourself 2.0 or Digital Do-It-Yourself. And in the 2012 volume called Open Design Now, it kind of lent a name to this movement in creating these alternatives to commercial products. And this volume actually looked at two aspects of open design. The first one is the openly shared design data and knowledge, and the second one is the open to participate process that it suggests. I will try to illustrate it a little bit. So it starts with, for example, 3 contributors making open contributions to come up with an open solution, which is our solution 1. There are 2 things that can happen then. Another contributor makes another open contribution and iterates the initial solution for a different one. Or somebody along the line can make a closed contribution and turn this open design into a black box, a closed solution. All in all, what is important here is that open design as it is does not suggest a participatory process that ends with a consensus and an end result. It is in theory a never-ending process. You can always change the designs and the process goes on. You never have an end result, but you only have iterations in the process. And when you look at it, it kind of creates 2 opportunities. The first one is from a cosmolocalism perspective, where you can actually, where there's a pool of global designs that are openly shared that can be actually adapted and manufactured at the local scale and individual scale according to local and individual needs. And it kind of and this is facilitated through the openness of the design data and knowledge and accessibility to precise desktop fabrication technologies such as laser cutters and 3D printers. From a circular economy perspective, this can suggest product part longevity through addressing these local and individual needs, preferences, and wants. But also the openness of the design data in theory enables repair, reuse, and refurbishing of things. So when I was doing my PhD, I wanted to look at it from an exploratory perspective because all these potentials, although mentioned a lot in the literature, there weren't really empirical data about it. And these were just suggested at the abstract level. So we kind of needed to explore it. So I developed a research through co-designing methodology to actually tackle this. Research through co-designing is basically research through designing with extra steps. In research designing, you kind of gather some theoretical background, and then you design using those, and you reflect your action, and you design again, you reflect again, and this process goes on until you reach a certain kind of design knowledge. In the research to co-designing approach, where I wanted to change, I wanted to explore the open design process, in which a lot of different designers and a lot of different makers actually end up iterating a solution for more than months. I had to create a co-design process in which the contributors designed and reflected on their action. And then I would reflect on the collective action of the whole thing to produce knowledge about this. So this project looked like this, where I reviewed the literature, I created the kitchen workshops, in which there were 21 open design outcomes and presentations and 2 focus groups that I could analyze. And I came up with sustainable design considerations for open design, open part properties, enabling these with every iteration, and strategies for iterating that responds to sustainable design, these sustainable design considerations. You will notice that I have used some similar generative toolkits for mockups and practice timelines, and some sustainable design considerations I derived from the literature to reflect the literature review onto the process. And 3D posters, which are not as cool as they sound. They're basically a sheet of paper where you place the mockup on top of and then take notes about certain parts of it. These workshops, I conducted 2 of these workshops, and they had a similar structure where the first group created an initial solution and it presented and shared it and gave it to another group, who then iterated it according to their own needs and preferences, presented and shared it, and a third group iterated it once more according to their needs and then shared it. In the first workshop, the idea was an initial solution was iterated for the same practice. For example, the solution 1 for making soup was iterated for soup making again of a different set of users, and then once again soup making for a third, according to third team's needs and preferences, which look like this. For example, where the first group created a solution for Chinese soups, and the second one actually iterated it for maintenance with dishwasher, and the third group actually wanted to make more soup, larger portions of soup for weekly consumption, and that is how they iterated this. In the second workshop, the idea was that each solution was iterated for different practices. Whereas, for example, if you follow Team 4, they developed a solution for making cakes, who then iterated it for preparing grilled sandwiches, and then second team iterated it for making crepes. So it kind of created a lot of different things, considerations, where the first group created a solution for mixing baking ingredients without spillage. They utilized a silicone cover for it. And the second group iterated the solution for making grilled sandwiches. And the third group iterated it for crepe dough portioning and cooking on the serving plate here. So the analysis happened in 2 different ways, where I actually looked at and analyzed the design outcomes, design solutions according to different part properties and how they respond to, how they seem to respond to certain sustainable design considerations. But I also looked at how certain parts are used and reused in different iterations. For example, in the first one here, the silicone cover is used to minimize spillage, but in the second and third outcome, it is used as a heat-resistant stand, which is a completely different purpose and completely different than what it was initially intended for. And for example, here, the housing for the blender was used to house a heating element, but in the third one, it was completely changed. The whole thing was adapted. The whole design was adapted to house a crepe dough portioning container and a different heating housing. But this was just inspiring. So that is how I looked at the open design process and how it could actually enable the reuse of parts and the repair of parts according to these. And in the second iteration, what can be noticed is that you can actually add more parts, you can actually adapt the design of parts, or you can abstract a certain part for a completely different purpose. And then I identified these different product part properties, responding to different sustainable design considerations. So this was a really interesting way to look at it, and I actually presented my initial outcomes in an open source circular economy days in Helsinki. And people were quite interesting because these considerations were kind of new to them. And they thought that that would be a great way to actually initiate a continuous process where they could actually reuse part as much as they could, and designing for it from the very beginning. After these, I went to, because of my interest in circular economy and design for sustainability, I went to Ireland as part of the Circular Design Learning for Innovative Design for Sustainability project. So this was an educational project, and it looked at university education and professional development courses. And it was focusing for designing for the circular economy with a multi-stakeholder approach to recapturing embedded value and addressing these strategies on product, service, and systems levels. And then also as an approach to teaching, it adopted a co-learning approach, and it focused on practice-based learning, multidisciplinary practices, and acknowledging the different skills and knowledge between SMEs, universities, and different design education backgrounds. It wanted all parties learn from each other in that sense. So what it advocated for was circular economy thinking embedded throughout the design process. This was a project with 12 partners in 4 countries, Spain, the Netherlands, Sweden, and Ireland. And I had 3 main tasks as part of this project. I developed this open educational resources database, where I actually brought together readily available yet dispersed resources, you know, the ones you normally receive through an email and then you could never find a website for. I kind of brought them together and categorized them according to their different scenarios, like first-timers, practitioners, business services and policies, and design education. And under them, there were 12 subcategories. But the main thing I did was I developed this circular design internship, in which we created a co-learning environment for interns from 4 countries and different backgrounds, industry partners and researcher educators. So these 4 consecutive internships, there were going to be 4 consecutive internships building on top of each other. And I kind of suggested a collaboration action research framework that is a commonly used methodology in education research, where we developed in Ireland this framework, and the very first instance of the internship, where we found the local industry partners, developed it further, had the first internship, reflected on our outcomes, and sent the internship material to, for example, Spain, who then reviewed and had the process further develop the internship structure. So this was a very interesting and challenging thing, because this was students from all of these universities attended to each workshop, each internship. So we had students from Ireland, but also from Spain, the Netherlands, and Sweden, and this was the case for the following internships as well. So this, for example, this is a photo from the end of the Ireland internship. This was a very interesting experience for us, for them, for the industry partners participating. Because what we did was we actually created an external design consultancy based in the design studio, and the industry partners were actually clients, and the students were actually doing their first very professional design work, and they were doing it for the circular economy. So we were very happy with the results, because most of these students that you see there holding their certificates ended up either taking jobs on design for sustainability or going to master's programs in sustainable design and service design for the circular economy. The third thing I did, very related to this, I developed, along with the Fabrication Limeric's director, Javier Burian, we developed a digital fabrication lab handbook for circular design. This introduced makerspaces types, equipment and procedures in general in the Fab Labs, alternative business and funding models that are completely different from the way business is being done here now, alternative fabrication materials for the generally found equipment. And the most important part is we introduced the Fab City initiative. FabCity initiative was launched in 2014 with the governor of Barcelona pledging that Barcelona will actually end up producing everything it consumes locally by 2054. This initiative started with this initiative is a collaborative attempt between the Fab Lab network and the cities, and it's also a call for participation to other cities to make the same pledge. And I guess there are now 40 cities around the world. They say that, well, we are going to produce and consume everything locally. So this is a rather ambitious thing. But the vision suggests that the Industrial Revolution after 100 years, it happened. After 100 years, it happened, is something like this, where you extract raw material, ship it all the way around the world, where you produced it, and you ship it back to global north for consumption. And the waste, resulting waste, end up again shipped to another location. So it suggests huge transportation cycles between each stage of life cycle, and the value creation is accumulated in the global north, in Europe and North America. And what they suggest is that, well, we can create local value creation and recapture cycles where everything is produced and consumed and then recycled and reused in different cities, in localities. And we can do this if we regard makerspaces as capable microfactories, and if they can actually end up recycling and reuse the things that are consumed within the city. And then the only commodity exchange between different localities around the world can be data. And this suggests that this is how we can actually end up with self-sufficient cities and economies. This is looking at it at a very local level. And it's actually considering a different kind of standardization in microfactories or makerspaces. And looking at this with my experience back in Ireland and my experience in Sustainable Design Research Lab on sustainability and my own research on open design and distributed production throughout this thing, I ended up taking a postdoctoral position as part of the Popmakina Project in the Koç University. So this project focuses on city-level circularity through maker communities, very similar to FabCity initiative, but slightly different. And it looks at maker communities and it aims to connect existing communities with relevant stakeholders and building necessary skills and knowledge and awareness on circular economy so that it can actually espouse and sustain collaboration amongst maker communities for a city-level circular economy. And this in turn can create city-level value recapture with a multi-stakeholder approach, addressing the circular economy strategies at the city scale and engaging general public in circular making practices. So it just has a collaborative approach. And this is a research and innovation project of the Horizon 2020 framework program. So it suggests that we are researching stuff, but also we are implementing them in different cities. So this project has more partners. So it's a little bit messier as a consortium. There are 23 partners and 7 pilot cities which are Istanbul, Thessaloniki, Piraeus, Santander, Leuven, Venlo, and Kaunas. And our role as Koç University, my role is we have done surveys and city vision workshops in each of these cities where we actually found out city level capabilities, infrastructure, areas of intervention, and a local maker ecosystem map. And now I'm kind of leading the structuring of co-design sessions. And this is where we are co-designing city pilots, what we are going to implement, what kind of activities we are going to do in each city, where we invite maker ecosystem actors to these. And we are having co-design sessions so that we can decide on what kind of activities we can do and how we can implement, how we can demonstrate the potential of maker ecosystem actor and collaborative production for city-level circular economies. All in all, I'm sorry I cannot say much about Popmakina project right now because our results are currently coming in and we haven't analyzed them yet. But in the end, on the open design side, There are a lot of further research opportunities on alternative ways of doing business, because intellectual property is completely different. Everything is open now. And it also creates problems about reliability of open knowledge and assigning responsibility. For example, who is responsible when a certain product breaks down? Is it the one who designed it, who manufactured it, who adapted it? It's a messy question. But it also creates questions about how horizontal communities manage, because the knowledge is open. Everybody is somehow on a collaborating on a horizontal level. Everybody is a contributor. On the circular economy side, the research opportunities are still ongoing, and these are the pertaining issues to designing for sustainability and circular economy that we have been researching for a long time, which is the sustainable consumption and behavior change aspect of it, the different levels of design intervention at the product level, service level, and systems level, and the embedded multi-stakeholder thinking that we need to still develop and create ways for different kinds of collaboration to actually initiate the circular economy strategies. And in between, where they actually intersect, we have the maker symbiosis and how it can happen, how different small maker communities and individual makers can come together, collaborate to actually initiate a circular economy supply chain, let's say, and value capture chain at the local scale, how we can actually achieve self-sufficiencies and economies through these smaller production facilities, and how we can enable these circular economy strategies on the local and individual levels. So this is what I wanted to talk about. I know that it was loaded, so if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask me, and I will try to answer them as well as I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Yekta. It was a very clear, and yes, it was a very loaded presentation. And may I ask to the participants if they have any questions?
Hi, Yekta. Thank you very much for your presentation. That was really interesting.
Alan.
One quick question about the research through design and the co-design. Were you a participant in the research through design? So did you also participate in the co-design, or did you just gather other people and facilitate the process?
Well, that's a tricky question. Of course, I end up participating because I have developed a research toolkit and I needed to adapt it for the second one. But then again, I did not participate in the actual designing of things at all. I just gave them a mock-up tool. But then again, I gave them the sustainable design consideration cards as well. Also the practice timelines. So I kind of ended up governing the process.
Did you feel at times that you wanted to be involved?
Oh yeah, I did. Actually, I did a lot. Actually, I had a chance that there was one more workshop that wasn't included in my analysis that was conducted under the Open Source Circular Economy Days Helsinki chapter in 2016 when I was there. Some of the participants couldn't show up, so there were some groups that couldn't handle it, and the participant number wasn't really satisfactory anyway, so it was obvious that I wasn't going to include it, so I ended up participating. So I have some experience about it.
That's great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can ask your questions by just turning your microphone on, or also write in the chat box. Okay, I will ask a question, Yekta.
Yep, please.
Well, this seems that it will really change the way we look at the design process. You know, we need to perhaps have a critical look to the existing process of design, but you know, integrate particular co-design techniques and yeah, consider circular economy strategies. What are your opinions? How realistic is this, do you think, when you consider the, traditional design process and, production strategies?
Well, of course, I can't really say much about it because I don't have empirical data on it. But when you look at it from a very practical perspective, for example, the Popmakina project that I'm currently in, of course, that's a big consortium project with a lot of partners, and it got a huge amount of funding from the European Union because they want to have a look at this distributed production opportunity. But then again, you see how the incumbent modes of production and consumption actually seeps into this thinking. So, for example, they are, one work package is about developing business models, but they are not that alternative. They are just simple small and medium enterprises. Or they're looking at intellectual property things, and they are looking at it from an actual intellectual property. They are developing a digital platform based on blockchain, so innovative, but then again, they are making it a free market again. So that it doesn't really work any different than the current way it is. So those are the parts that we are not responsible for. I am voicing my concerns about it, but then again, it's not truly alternative anymore. On the one hand, there's this problem, but on the other hand, it kind of changes the act of designing. I mean, the designers begin to take on the role of designer producers because, I mean, the whole design data is open and you are not getting actually any money. You're not making a living out of the design of things, but you're actually making the money when you produce those things now. So it kind of creates a different hybrid model of responsibilities. So this is already happening anyway. I mean, there are a lot of designers now end up producing their own signature designs and selling it. But now this is different. The design does not belong to you. So that is where the intellectual property becomes a question. There are certain licenses, such as the general public license or Creative Commons is wrongly used for these kind of design solutions. But then again, there are certain kinds of licenses that in theory, limit the reuse of designs for non-commercial purposes. And it sounds like they protect your rights or anything, but then again, it's just open. I mean, everybody can just take the design. So there are a lot of challenges to solve, but I think it kind of has to go that way because this model suggests a very radical localization. And although I am researching about it from a sustainability perspective, the whole COVID pandemic situation showed how important local production capabilities are. I mean, in Turkey, maybe in Ankara, we didn't really feel it, but there are a lot of parts of the world that couldn't access to anything once all those routes were cut off and globalization failed in that sense, because we cannot ship anything anywhere anymore. So that now this localization, extreme localization is gaining traction again as a perspective. So I think it will happen. I don't know how, but it will somehow happen.
Thank you, Yekta.
I also have a question. Yekta, thank you very much for your comprehensive presentation. The methods and tools that you have used and actually developed in your PhD research, to what extent you were able to, or you are able to transfer that methodology to the projects that you are involved in? You have many experiences in European Union projects. You mentioned about collaborative action research and the latest one, city-level circularity, and you're organizing these co-design workshops. I'm just wondering to what extent that type of methodological approach and knowledge and skills can be transferable.
Okay, I did not really use the ERM toolkit because we are not doing physical workshops anymore, as you would imagine. So now I am creating completely online workshop tools. I will be conducting completely online workshops. and in 7 different cities now, because now they're online. They felt like, well, I could actually participate in those too. So I am developing projective tools in online workshop environments. But then again, constructive tools are really harder to build now with the online thing, because when you want to design, when you want to include people into designing things online, you kind of expect them to have some computer-aided design knowledge or something like that, any form of it, even 2D. So it becomes a problem. So now I am only using the generative tools that are projective in the sense that, in that sense. In the previous research, I'm thinking I did utilize an ERM or a similar toolkit, but not as part of my research, but in the form of a teaching tool, because the interns especially were looking for a quick way to mock up things, because it was a very packed project for them, and they were actually trying to decide on things very quickly because they were having deadlines with the client out there. And then I suggested this as a way of, because Limerick University had a Fab Lab under the School of Design, so they could have access to these digital fabrication technologies quite easily. So they went there, they created small toolkits out of cardboards, and they kind of brought together, tested small things, and that is how they utilized it. But then again, it wasn't for research.
Thank you, Yekta.
There's a question for Baruta. I definitely think that.
Yeah, shall we read the question?
If I think
for the
yes,
report, can you read the question, or Bahar Hoca can read it?
Yes, I can.
Baruta is asking if I. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I'm here, Yekta. It was a quite long question, so that's why I typed it. Of course, you may not have a specific experience, but as I said, it's a curiosity question about. We are discussing implication of open design for professional designers, but how about student designers? So how do you see the future for them?
Actually, there are examples of certain cases where open design is implemented into design education. And I actually ended up doing it for the internship program that I developed in Ireland. I think it's important because it kind of creates a different culture of collaboration as well. It's not just a team anymore of 3 designers coming together, but it's about you creating something, putting it out online, expecting comments, getting a lot of feedback. It kind of creates a different kind of collaboration culture. That is why I think it's quite crucial, actually, to integrate it into the design education. The way I did was, for example, we always think about things in a systems perspective, but for example, in one of the projects that was developed by the interns in the internship that I developed, was a project for social innovation in university campuses, and it was not for profit in the end. So open design also creates a lot of opportunities for knowledge exchange and dissemination of these social innovation projects that they can end up being implemented in other places as well. So it is not just a product design alternative, but it's an alternative for design projects for the social good. So I think it's important to put it out there to create a different kind of collaboration culture, and where people actually end up collaborating in a more widespread manner, thanks to internet technologies, I guess. So
thanks, Yekta. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? Well, okay. Since there are no questions, I would like to thank Yekta again for this very interesting presentation. And I would like to thank the participants for coming.
Thank you very much for having me. Hope you all enjoyed it.
Thank you, Yekta. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, and bye for now.
Teşekkürler Yekta.
Bye. Have a nice day.